I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. Even as a little girl, while other kids played with dolls and toy cars, I was fascinated by my father's medical textbooks. Dad was a general practitioner in our small Connecticut town, and Mom ran his office. They had big dreams for me, just not the ones I chose. Sophia, my mother would say, smoothing her perfectly pressed skirt, medicine is changing. It's not what it used to be. You need something more reliable. I'm Dr. Sophia Chen now, one of the country's leading transplant surgeons, but back then, I was just their disappointing daughter who refused to follow their carefully laid plans. The problem started during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to Johns Hopkins University's pre-med program, my dream school, with a partial scholarship. But my parents had other ideas. Business school, Dad announced one evening over dinner. Your cousin Marcus is making 6 figures right out of college in finance. That's the future. But Dad, I want to be a doctor, like you. He set down his fork, his face hardening. Being a doctor isn't what it used to be, Sophia. Insurance companies, paperwork, lawsuits. I want better for you. What they really wanted was for me to join United Capital, the investment firm where my uncle was a partner. They had it all planned out. I would get my MBA, work my way up through the company, and eventually take over my uncle's position. It's all arranged, Mom said, sliding a university brochure across the table. Your uncle has already spoken to the admissions office at Wharton. With our connections, you're guaranteed a spot. I pushed the brochure away. I don't want to work in finance. I want to save lives. Save lives. Mom scoffed. Do you know how many doctors are drowning in student debt? Working endless hours just to make ends meet. I don't care about the money. Well, you should. Dad's fist hit the table, making the dishes rattle. We didn't work this hard to watch you throw away your future on some idealistic dream. That night marked the beginning of a war in our house. Every dinner became a battlefield, every conversation a negotiation. They tried everything: guilt trips, threats, even bribes. Think about the family name, Mom would plead. Think about your future children. But I couldn't give up my dream. Medicine wasn't just a career choice for me, it was a calling. I spent my evenings volunteering at the local hospital, shadowing doctors, learning everything I could. The more time I spent there, the more certain I became. The breaking point came 2 weeks before graduation. I had secretly accepted the offer from Johns Hopkins, using my savings from summer jobs to pay the deposit. When the acceptance package arrived in the mail, my mother opened it before I could get home. I walked into chaos. How dare you? Mom was standing in the living room, papers scattered around her feet. Going behind our backs like this. Dad sat in his armchair, his face a mask of disappointment. We gave you everything, Sophia. The best schools, every opportunity. And this is how you repay us? It's my life. I said, my voice shaking but determined. I want to be a doctor. I want to help people. Help people? Mom laughed bitterly. You can't even help yourself make the right decision. Well, if you're so determined to ruin your life, you won't do it on our dime. Dad stood up slowly. You have a choice, Sophia. Accept the place at Wharton that we've arranged, or what? Or you're on your own. Completely. No support, no money, no home. I looked at them. These people who had raised me, who had taught me to stand up for what I believed in, now trying to force me to abandon my dreams. Then I guess I'm on my own. The next few hours passed in a blur. I packed what I could into my old Honda Civic. Clothes, books, the stethoscope I'd bought with my own money. My parents watched from the doorway, probably thinking I'd break down and change my mind. But I didn't. "If you drive away now," Mom called out as I started the car, "don't bother coming back." Dad's voice followed me down the driveway. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." I drove straight to Aunt Maria's house. She was my mother's younger sister, the black sheep of the family who had chosen to become a high school teacher instead of joining the family business. She took one look at my tear-stained face and opened her arms. That night, curled up on her couch, I told her everything. "They think they're protecting you," she said, stroking my hair. "But they're just scared. Scared of watching you struggle, scared of seeing you choose a different path than the one they planned." "What if they're right?" I whispered. "What if I fail?" Aunt Maria smiled. "Then you'll fail doing something you love, instead of succeeding at something that makes you miserable." She helped me plan everything: student loans, part-time jobs, scholarship applications. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. "You can stay with me until you leave for Baltimore," she said. "And during breaks too. This is your home now." The next few months were a crash course in independence. I worked 2 jobs over the summer: mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the hospital gift shop. Every penny went into my college fund. My parents didn't call. Not when I graduated high school. Aunt Maria cheered loud enough for 3 people. Not when I packed up for college. Not even on my birthday. But as I drove away from Connecticut toward Baltimore, toward my future, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sometimes being cut off is really being set free. I just didn't know then that 12 years later, they would need me more than I ever needed them. Medical school was everything I dreamed of and harder than I ever imagined. While most of my classmates had family support, both financial and emotional, I worked my way through every semester. Between classes, clinical rotations, and part-time jobs, sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. My first year at Johns Hopkins, I lived in the smallest apartment I could find. Really just a converted garage with a hot plate and a shower that barely worked. But it was mine, earned with my own money. I still remember my first day in an anatomy lab. Standing over the cadaver, I felt a mix of awe and determination. This was where I belonged. While other students flinched or turned green, I was fascinated. My lab partner, Michael, noticed. "You're different," he said during our lunch break. "Most people are just trying not to throw up on their first day." I shrugged. This is why I'm here, to understand how to fix people. Michael became my first real friend in medical school. He came from old money. His family had a wing named after them at 3 different hospitals. But he never made me feel less for having to work my way through school. "You're crazy," he'd say, finding me studying in the library at 2 a.m. after my shift at the campus cafe. "Let me help. My trust fund is just sitting there." But I always refused. This was my journey, my struggle, and I would make it on my own. During my second year, I discovered my calling. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the head of transplant surgery, gave a guest lecture that changed my life. She showed us a video of a heart transplant she performed, the intricate dance of removing a failing organ and replacing it with one that could give someone a second chance at life. After class, I gathered my courage and approached her. "Dr. Martinez, I'd love to learn more about transplant surgery." She looked at me thoughtfully. "It's the hardest specialty to get into. Long hours, high stress, constant on-call. Most students run the other way. I'm not most students." Something in my voice must have convinced her. She offered me a research position in her lab, unpaid, of course, but invaluable experience. I took it without hesitation, even though it meant picking up extra weekend shifts to make up for the time I'd spend in the lab. Meanwhile, life went on back home. Aunt Maria kept me updated about my parents, though I never asked. Dad's practice was doing well. Mom had joined the hospital board. My cousin Marcus, their shining example of success, had made junior partner at United Capital. They ask about you, Aunt Maria would say during our weekly phone calls. They'll never admit it, but they read every article about the medical school in the local paper, hoping to see your name. I didn't respond to that. The pain of their rejection had hardened into something else, not quite anger, but a cold determination to succeed despite them, not because of them. During my third-year rotations, I finally found my groove. While other students dreaded the long hours and intense pressure, I thrived on it. Surgery became my home, the operating room my sanctuary. Dr. Martinez noticed. She started inviting me to observe her transplant surgeries, teaching me things that weren't in any textbook. The hard part isn't the technical skill, she told me one night as we scrubbed out after a successful liver transplant. It's carrying the weight of knowing that every decision you make could mean life or death for your patient. I graduated from medical school ranked second in my class. The ceremony was bittersweet. Aunt Maria cheered from the audience, but the 2 empty seats beside her felt like an accusation. My residency match was everything I'd hoped for. The transplant surgery program at Massachusetts General Hospital. 5 more years of brutal hours, endless study, and gradually increasing responsibility. I specialized in high-risk cases that other surgeons wouldn't touch. My research focused on improving success rates in complex multi-organ transplants. Slowly, my reputation grew. By my 4th year of residency, I was being called in to consult on the most difficult cases. Patients started requesting me specifically, even though I was still technically in training. The attending surgeons trusted me with increasingly complex procedures. Then came the case that would make my career. Emma Collins was 8 years old, suffering from a rare genetic condition that was causing multiple organ failure. She needed a combined heart-liver transplant, a procedure so complex that most hospitals wouldn't even attempt it. Her parents had been told to prepare for the worst, but I couldn't accept that. I spent weeks researching her case, developing a new surgical approach that might work. Dr. Anderson, the chief of surgery, listened to my proposal with growing interest. "It's never been done quite this way," he said, studying my diagrams. "But theoretically, it could work. Let me try." I pleaded. "She deserves a chance." He agreed, but with a condition. He would supervise, but I would lead the surgery. It would be my chance to prove myself, but also my greatest risk. If something went wrong, my career could be over before it really began. The surgery took 14 hours. 14 hours of intense concentration, split-second decisions, and the kind of precision that leaves no room for error. By hour 10, even Dr. Anderson was looking tired, but I felt more focused than ever. When we finally closed, when Emma's new heart was beating strongly, and her new liver was functioning perfectly, Dr. Anderson looked at me with newfound respect. "I've been doing this for 30 years, he said as we scrubbed out. "I'd never seen anything quite like that." Emma's case was written up in medical journals. I was invited to present at conferences, teach my technique to other surgeons. At 30, I became the youngest attending transplant surgeon in Mass General's history. My parents must have read about it. The medical community isn't that large, and success stories like Emma's make news, but they never reached out. I told myself it didn't matter. I had built my own life, my own success, without them. I had proved them wrong about everything. Then, on a routine Tuesday morning, my assistant handed me a new case file. Priority transplant evaluation, she said. Patient needs a specialized procedure. Very complex case. I opened the file and felt the world stop spinning. The patient's name was James Chen, my father. I stared at my father's medical file for what felt like hours. His condition was serious. End-stage liver disease complicated by a rare vascular disorder. He needed a specialized type of transplant that only a handful of surgeons in the country could perform. I was one of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. The career path they had so thoroughly rejected was now their only hope. According to the file, they had been referred to Mass General by their local hospital. They probably had no idea I worked here. Dr. Chen. My assistant's voice snapped me back to reality. The patient's initial consultation is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Should I reassign the case? I thought about it. I could easily pass this to another surgeon, avoid the confrontation altogether. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe that last stubborn thread of daughterly duty, made me shake my head. No, keep it on my schedule. That night, I barely slept. I reviewed his case over and over, though I had memorized every detail at first glance. The surgery he needed was one I had pioneered, a modified approach to liver transplantation for patients with complicated vascular issues. Without it, his chances of survival were less than 20%. At 8:55 the next morning, I stood outside my office, heart pounding. Through the window, I could see them sitting in the consultation room. My father, noticeably thinner than I remembered, and my mother, her hair now streaked with gray. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Good morning. I'm Dr. Sophia Chen. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face went pale, then flushed. For a moment, we all just stared at each other, 12 years of absence hanging between us like a physical thing. Sophia. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Mom. I kept my voice professional as I sat down behind my desk. I've reviewed your case thoroughly, Dad. The situation is serious, but there are options we can discuss. You're the specialist they referred us to. My father sounded dazed. Yes, I developed the surgical technique you need. Currently, I'm one of only 3 surgeons in the country qualified to perform it. My mother started crying silently. My father just stared at me, seeing for the first time the doctor I had become, the doctor they had tried to prevent me from being. I walked them through the procedure, explaining every detail with clinical detachment. Inside, my emotions were chaos, but outwardly, I maintained my professional composure. The success rate for this procedure, with me as primary surgeon, is 94%, I concluded. Without it, your prognosis is poor. The choice, of course, is yours. My father cleared his throat. You're really the best option I have? Yes, and as your doctor, I recommend proceeding with the surgery as soon as possible. As your daughter. I paused, the word feeling strange on my tongue. That's more complicated. Sophia. My mother reached across the desk, trying to take my hand. I pulled back slightly. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. Yes, you were. I kept my voice steady. You kicked me out for wanting exactly this, to be a doctor, to save lives. And now here we are. We thought we were protecting you, my father said softly. No, you thought you were controlling me. There's a difference. I stood up, gathering my papers. I'll give you time to think about your options. If you decide to proceed with me as your surgeon, my office will handle all the arrangements. If you prefer to seek treatment elsewhere, I can refer you to the other qualified surgeons, though their waiting lists are significantly longer. As I reached the door, my father called out, "Sophia, wait." I turned back. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "We're both so sorry." For a moment, I saw him not as my patient or as the father who had rejected me, but as a man facing his own mortality while confronting the magnitude of his mistakes. "I know," I replied softly. "But right now, that's not what matters. What matters is saving your life. We can deal with everything else after." The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. During that time, my parents tried several times to have personal conversations with me, but I maintained professional boundaries. I couldn't be both their daughter and their doctor, not yet. The morning of the surgery, my father looked scared for the first time I could remember. "Sophia," he caught my hand as they were preparing to take him to the operating room. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," I said firmly. "I'm the best at what I do, and I don't fail." The surgery took 11 hours. Every cut, every suture was perfect. I wouldn't accept anything less. When I finally walked out to the waiting room, my mother practically collapsed with relief at my smile. The surgery was successful, I told her. "He's stable, and the new liver is functioning well." She hugged me then, and for the first time in 12 years, I let her. During my father's recovery, we slowly began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. 12 years of hurt doesn't disappear overnight. But as he healed physically, we started to heal emotionally too. "I watch you with your other patients," he said one day during his recovery. "You were born for this. We were such fools to try to stop you." 6 months after the surgery, I invited them to my office again, not as patients this time, but as parents. I showed them my awards, my published research, the thank you letters from patients I'd saved. "You did all this despite us," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "No," I corrected her. "I did it because of me, because it's who I was meant to be." Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the hardest person to operate on is yourself. Cutting away the anger, transplanting forgiveness in its place. My parents and I will never have the relationship we might have had if they had supported me from the beginning. But we have something different now. Something built on respect, understanding, and the recognition that sometimes the best thing parents can do is let their children find their own path. I still keep my father's patient file in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of their rejection, but as proof that life has a way of bringing things full circle. They kicked me out for wanting to be a doctor, and being a doctor gave me the power to save my father's life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong, it's proving yourself right. Last week, a young intern came to me, torn between her passion for surgery and her family's pressure to choose a different specialty. "My parents say surgery is too demanding, that I'll never have a normal life," she told me, reminding me so much of myself at her age. I shared my story with her, showing her that sometimes the hardest path is the right one, because that's the real legacy I want to leave. Not just as the surgeon who pioneered new techniques or saved countless lives, but as someone who proved that you should never let anyone else define your dreams. Even now, when I stand in the operating room preparing to save another life, I think about that 18-year-old girl who drove away from home with nothing but a dream. She was right all along. Sometimes being cut off is the first incision in becoming who you're meant to be.